Greetings. 2020 has been quite a year for everyone in about all aspects of life. It's so important that we take a moment to acknowledge the hundreds and thousands of lives that have been lost. Even more, those people who have been affected by loss, be it lives of loved ones, jobs, security, and for some, their faith. For many, this feels like a time of holding on or getting through. And for our siblings of color, what must feel like holding your breath. There will come a time of collective mourning, and the church needs to be there for those people and for our communities. Since March, I've seen pastors and congregations step up and out of their sanctuaries, learning to lead worship online and continuing to improve the ways they reach people through technology. Seminaries don't have classes in ministry via Facebook Live or YouTube or Zoom yet. And while some of this technology is seemingly simple, this has been an especially difficult 8 months for our pastors. There's also been opportunity in these times. Because of technology, people are connecting with Presbyterian churches in worship outside of their immediate neighborhoods and even from across the country. The gospel is being shared in new ways. I've watched as leaders in our 11 presbyteries have brought pastors and congregational leaders together in weekly or monthly Zoom calls. I've heard pastors say that they feel more connected to others in their presbytery than ever before. Presbytery executives are gathering once a week as supportive colleagues in these strange times. And in some ways, social distancing has brought us together and made programmatic and educational training opportunities more available than ever. It's not just the pandemic that has made things so difficult this year. Our siblings in Louisiana have endured 3 hurricanes that have affected the lives of so many and made life, unbelievably, that much harder. There are still people without power and churches that remain boarded up until repairs can begin. I have been in contact with the Presbytery of South Louisiana, and we are considering ways that the Synod can be most helpful in the recovery efforts. Whether we like it or not, individually and collectively, our resilience is being tested. And at the same time, our capacity is being built. Normal is gone and will not be returning, at least not anytime soon. But the good news never changes, and we are called to preach it. And preach it we will. Even before the pandemic, it was the intention for the Synod's usual programmatic work to lie fallow. A year for a deep evaluation of the Synod's impact. Because 2020 is, 2020, work hasn't ceased. It's just looked different. In 2018, the Synod began leading the way with communications and social media ministry for the clients of the Communication Services Program. But this year, our efforts have expanded into webinars on authentic online worship, building resilience, and relief offerings through the Board of Pensions. All of those still available on our growing YouTube channel. Expect more growth of this equipping ministry very soon. The Synod's assessment process isn't over either. It's ongoing. The hope is that we will continue to learn and grow from intentionally asking questions like, are we living out our mission statement to connect, equip, and empower for Christ's mission in ways that are equitable, just, and supportive? Who and what kind of programs, networks, and institutions does the Synod support financially or otherwise? Who and what kind of programs, networks, and institutions does the Synod not support financially or otherwise? Where have we, as the Synod, been complicit in perpetuating systemic racism and failed our siblings in Christ? It can be really difficult to ask and honestly answer these questions when we are deep inside of the work ourselves. I pray that we will be open-hearted and willing to listen with an ear towards justice and push one another to that end. Now, amidst all of this, it might not seem like the best time for a sabbatical. But everyone, including my husband, can breathe a collective sigh of relief. It's over. And yet, I cannot thank you all enough for the time and space for a refreshing journey. It was good, incredibly good, in fact. We took time to do a couple of extended camping trips. I took several online courses, some for fun and some for continuing education. I spent time in what I am now calling my art studio, painting and pushing my creative boundaries. I spent time in my gardens, vegetable and butterfly, and some time with family. Because of the pandemic, there are plenty of things I had hoped to do but couldn't. And that's okay. I did allow the days of the calendar to pass with little regard. For me, during a normal year, that would be a huge thing. In a pandemic, not as much. But all of that means that I've had plenty of time to reflect. In every mid-council of the church, presbyteries or synods, there's a certain amount of codependency. That's especially true for synods. Pastors are members of a presbytery, accountable to the presbytery. Even when elected as a commissioner, you, whether you're a pastor or a ruling elder, are still volunteers. That is exactly why it is so easy for someone in my role to slip into a place that's more than facilitating. It can be a very delicate and sometimes lonely dance. I recall when the coordinating team asked me to step into the role of acting synod leader back in 2015. And even before that, when I was asked about my vision for the synod, my response has always been that the role should be more of a facilitator. In fact, that's what I wanted the job title to be. My job description even says that I am to facilitate and interpret the mission and ministry of the synod. Over the years, I've watched some mid-council leaders overfunction, including myself at times, often because our colleagues in ministry, teaching and ruling elders, are not fulfilling their roles, thus depending upon the mid-council leader to rescue the presbytery or synod. I'll let you talk amongst yourselves about how well I've carried out the interpretation piece, but I can tell you that there have been places where I've overstepped in the facilitation department and skipped straight to driving the bus. But the reality is that this is a shared ministry. This is not my synod. This is our synod. What we learned from the impact assessment earlier in the year is that we need to do a better job of training commissioners. I've been told by several past and current commissioners that they didn't really understand what the synod does until they were years into their term. No wonder that codependency exists. I have always felt that part of my job was to help you own your role. And I recognize now that I need to concentrate more specifically on developing the leaders within the synod. I'll be seeking more ways to empower commissioners to utilize their intelligence, energy, imagination, and love to fulfill their calling to service. In my sabbatical reflections, what has arisen for me is this: I am to love Christ and the people of the institution more than the institution itself. The synod is better served by leaders who are loved forward. So I'm committed to loving you forward as leaders of the synod by accompanying each commissioner in their synod journey, by being attentive to the committees and their needs for resources and training, by being an authentic leader and providing space for authentic and accountable relationships, by being an advocate for you and the work of your committees, and by doing all things from a perspective of abundance, because the gifts of God and God's mercy are never ceasing. I'm not as committed to moving the Synod forward as I am to loving you forward as we live out our calls together. Mr. Moderator, this concludes my report.